Hi guys, my name is Priscilla and welcome to my channel. So I have a really exciting video today. I was requested by a viewer. Her name's Erin Sullivan. Hi Erin. She asked me what my favorite books are. And the funny thing is, I know this might sound crazy, but I've never really put together my list of my favorite books. I just always say, oh, I love that book. Oh my gosh, it's one of my favorites. And I just keep saying that, but I've never actually sat down, made a list of what my favorite books are and ranked them. So I sat down, I made a list. I tried ranking them as best as I could, but not everything is in their exact spot. But they're around in the same region, within like a one ranking down from or up from the other one. But the one book that definitely is in the correct spot is the number one book. So let's get to it. So number 13 is Bram Stoker's Dracula. So I read this in 2011. I gave it 4 stars, and it's a little bit of a slow read. You know, it's not action-packed. It's obviously it was written forever ago, so it's not written in the way that I'm used to. But I love the atmosphere of this, and it was really interesting just to see kind of where like that vampire lore kind of came from. You know, I think this was the first book that was full-on written about vampires. So it was just really cool to just see where that came from. And it was a really interesting story. And just, again, the atmosphere is just so moody. It's perfect to read like during Halloween. This was sort of when the obsession with like annotating my books started. So like I printed out a picture of Bram Stoker and, Vlad the Impaler and like the movie Dracula, and just wrote all over the damn thing. So that's where the obsession started. Number 12 is Paula Hawkins' The Girl on the Train. Again, I'm such a big mood reader. If a book can put me, like almost immerse me in that world, then I love it. And that's what this book did. I love the unreliable narrator. I love the story. I love the twists. And this book actually made me cry at one point. And it's just so good. I just love a good mystery. So I read this in 2016 and I gave it 5 stars. Number 11 is John Scalzi's Lock In. I read this in 2016 and I gave it 5 stars. I actually listened to it on audiobook, but I loved it so much that I bought the physical copy because I want to reread it. So this is a science fiction kind of alternate history world where like a bunch of people got these flu-like symptoms, and about 1% of the population that got those flu-like symptoms were now diagnosed with Hayden syndrome. And that means that you're sort of locked in your body. It's almost like a coma, but your brain is still functioning. So victims are fully awake, but they can't respond to stimuli, they can't move, they can't talk. But their brains are still working. So a few years pass and the world has figured out a way to allow these victims to interact with the world. And they have sort of like their own internet where they can talk to each other, talk to other people. And you can actually sort of like rent by a robot, and you can embody that robot and go about the world, do your thing, work, do whatever. And there's actually a Hayden syndrome murder that happens, and these 2 detectives have to figure out who committed it. Was it the person that was, sort of like controlling the robot, or was there a hacking situation going on? So it's just really interesting. Again, sort of like a thriller mystery type of thing, but with science fiction. So yay, loved it. Number 10 is Jenny Lawson's Furiously Happy, and it's her memoir, her second memoir, and I read it in 2019. I read it January of 2019, and I gave it 5 stars. So it's a really funny memoir about her struggles with mental illness and how her counter to that is to live, but not just live her life, but live furiously happy. So she devises these ways to make her just go out in the world, live it to the fullest, and be crazy, be weird as much as you want. As long as you're doing it to be happy and to be yourself, that's all that matters. This book was really heartwarming. It was hilarious, and it was actually really interesting. It was very insightful, and I loved it. Number 9 is George Orwell's 1984. I read this in 2017, and I gave it 5 stars. Well, that's the first time I read it. I read it again, I think, last year. I mean, what can I say about 1984? It's friggin' crazy. I again love the atmosphere of this, even though it's depressing, but I still really enjoyed it. And it's just so interesting to see what that world would be like, if we had this sort of like crazy dictator who wanted to control everything. And you can't say anything bad about him. Anyway, so I love 1984. I know a lot of people are confused by this, but I don't know. I just love the mood, the feeling, the like you just kind of really are like you're anxious the whole time you're reading it. You're scared for these characters. And I think that's the mark of a really good book. Number 8 is Rachel King's Ill Wind. And I read this in 2017 and I gave it 5 stars. This is the first book of the Weather Warden series. And it's set in Oklahoma City. And it's like an urban fantasy world. And in this world, we have weather wardens who can control the weather. But it's not just a free-for-all. They can do whatever they want. They have their own ways to govern themselves. The main character's name is Joanne Baldwin, and she finds herself being accused of murder. And so she has to figure out a way to clear her name, but also trying to run away from the weather wardens, the governing body, because they just don't believe her. So she has to, clear her name first before they catch her. And I love this book. It's action-packed. The main character is awesome. She's like a kick-ass girl who, isn't taking crap from anyone. There's a little bit of a romance, like very little bit, but it's good enough. The rest of the series is also really good. I haven't finished it. It's right over here. It's massive. But I've read, I don't know, I think 2 or 3 books in it. And I love it so far. It's crazy. I don't even remember what happens exactly in certain books, but I don't even care because while I'm reading it, I'm having a ton of fun. And yeah, I love things set with I love books having to do with crazy weather, thunderstorms, snowstorms. I just love that kind of stuff. So this was really fun. And I read it for the Vaginal Fantasy book club. So I'm really glad I did. And now I just got to finish the whole series. Number 7 is Charlene Harris's Real Murders. I read this in 2018 and I gave it 5 stars. This is book 1 of the Aurora Tea Garden Mysteries, I think it's what it's called, the series. I kind of consider this a cozy mystery. So this book is about a librarian who lives in a small town in the South. I think it's South Carolina. No, Georgia. I'm cheating. I'm looking at my thing here. Her name's Aurora Tea Garden, and she has this, it's called the Real Murders book club. So they meet in the library and they talk about real murders. They read the books about them and talk about them. Kind of like, they're like murderinos. If you don't know, that's fans of the My Favorite Murder podcast, which I freaking love. So then in this really small town where nothing happens, there is a real murder that happens. And she kind of gets swept up in that and has to try and figure out who committed the murder and what's going on in her small town that she thought was perfect. Librarians plus murder equals yes. Number 6 is Deanna Rayborn's Silent in the Grave. I read this in 2017 and I gave it 5 stars. I also read this for the Vaginal Fantasy book club. This is book 1 of the Lady Julia Gray series, and it's a mystery novel set in Victorian times. It's about Lady Julia Gray. So it starts off with her and her husband are throwing a dinner party for her friends, and he collapses and dies. And she thinks he has just passed away from a hereditary thing that all the men in his family suffer from, which is like a heart disease, something like that. But when this private investigator agent shows up and tells her that it's a murder that happened, she's really pissed and she's like, "What are you talking about? It's not murder. There's no murder that happens in this perfect family." So then he starts convincing her that something else is going on, and so while he's investigating, she's also trying to butt in and investigate along with him. And there is a little bit of romance. There's a lot of action, and it's just so much fun. I love all of the characters in this book. So she starts off being like this very prim and proper Victorian lady, but you know, their family, like the March family, they're not just like everyone else. They're quirky, they're weird, and you just fall in love with the whole cast of characters. And she doesn't change. Her arc doesn't grow as much in this book, but the rest of the series, I just finished the last book, the last novella, and she changes so much. And I love them. I love everyone. I love this book. I love this series. I love Deanna Rayborn. Read it. Number 5. Another Charlene Harris. So this is Dead Until Dark. This is the first book of the Southern Vampires Sookie Stackhouse series. I don't know if this book is my favorite out of the entire series. I haven't finished the series, by the way. I'm up to book 5, I think. Yeah. But I picked the first one just because it's the first one. I don't know. I can't pick out of all of them. So if you don't know anything about these series, this is what the show True Blood was based on. So Sookie lives in Louisiana, a very small town in Louisiana. It's sort of an alternate history world where vampires were able to come out of the coffin because the Japanese have invented synthetic blood. So they don't need to kill humans to live anymore. So they were able to come out and, do things with society, with, regular Americans. And so no one in her small town of Bon Temps, I can't say it, don't make me say it again. They've never seen a vampire, but then she's a waitress working at Merlotte's, and in walks in her first vampire. Everyone's staring at him, and there's something different about her, of course, that he's really interested in. So Sookie can read minds, but she cannot read vampire minds, which also really interests her to him because, she can actually breathe. She doesn't have to be constantly being bombarded with thoughts from someone else. So they sort of take a liking to each other. And again, more murder, things happen. And this is another one of those books where I am fully immersed in the world. And to me, that's just my favorite thing. If I'm completely in this world and it takes me a while to once I've stopped reading, it takes me a while to come back out of the book. That's my favorite thing. I read this in 2017 and I gave it 4 stars. The reason I didn't give it 5 stars is because I think I was comparing it to the show, and I really like the show. I think I like at least the first series a lot more than I like the book. I miss some of the characters that we don't have in the book, but we do in the show. I won't talk about it in case you've never read this book and you want to give it a shot. But yeah, so I rated it lower just because I think I was comparing it a little bit too much to the show. I also love anything set in the South. I love stories set in the South. I don't know why, but it's a thing. Number 4 is J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. I read this in 2011 and I gave it 5 stars. So I love all the books in these series, obviously. I think this might be my favorite just because it's dark and moody, and I think a lot of crazy things come out, a lot of secrets come out in this book, a lot of things happen, and it's whimsical it's dark while still being whimsical and still being sweet. Unlike Deathly Hallows, which is just a puddle of tears. So that's why I think this is my favorite. I mean, it's hard to rank, but just pick any book in the Harry Potter series and it's my favorite. Now we're getting down to the really good stuff. Number 3 is Rachel Bach's Fortune's Pawn. I just love this book. I love these series so much. I first read this in 2015 for the Vaginal Fantasy Book Club, and then I reread it again last year, and I gave it 5 stars. I read all 3 books, so this is book 1 of the Fortune's Pawn, or the Paradox series. Jesus. I reread all 3 books back to back to back. And I mean, that was really the way to do it. Because the series, I forget. The thing with me is I read books, but I forget details very easily. So it was great to read all 3 books all at once. But anyway, let me get to explaining it to you. So this is a sci-fi / kind of romance book, mostly set in a spaceship. It reminds me a lot of Firefly, but if Firefly had animals as captains, kind of. So Deanna Morris is a mercenary, and she really wants to get to the highest ranking job that she can, and to do that she really needs to impress her, hopefully future bosses. So she takes a job on this ship that is known for crazy things happen on the ship, and it's, if you last a month, you're like a god. So she heads off on this trade ship with her crew, and oh my God, you don't even know what's coming at you. So many things happen. So first of all, the action scenes, the things she has to fight, the things she has to do are crazy and amazing, and the world building in this is great. I love all the different aliens, the different species, the different worlds. Everything is awesome. But then there's also this crazy mystery in the background that she has to try and figure out what the heck's going on, who she can trust, and the romance in this whole series. But this, just read it. Just freaking read it. Number 2 is coming for you. Number 2 is Felicia Day's memoir, You're Never Weird on the Internet, Almost. Yes, I have 2 copies, and they're both signed. I read this in 2015 as soon as it came out, 5 stars. I also listened to the audiobook. I think I read both of these books and listened to the audiobook. So I've heard the story 4 times. It never gets old. If you don't know who Felicia Day is, she is an actress, a director, creator, freaking badass queen of my life. She created the series The Guilds, which is a web series. It started on YouTube, but it's on Netflix right now if you want to read that or listen to that. Watch that. Oh my God. I'm just kidding. She's just so beautiful. I get distracted. Let me just hold one of them up. All right. And she is also an actress. She was in Supernatural. That's actually how I first found out about her. Oh my God, her character on Supernatural is great. And she was also in Buffy. And so this is her memoir, and it starts off talking about her crazy childhood. She was homeschooled with her brother, and it's just talking about her crazy, weird ass life and how it's okay to be weird. It's actually good to be weird because then you're not like everyone else. And it talks about also how she went to college when she was 16. She was a major in violin, and she was also a math major. Like, the brains on this woman. And then when she was done in college, she went to Hollywood to act. And it talks about her struggles with anxiety and starting off the YouTube channel Geek and Sundry, which is like a mecca for nerds, and how stressful that was, dealing with acting and all the things. And she's hilarious. There's picture. Oh, look, it's my name. There's pictures in here. And oh yeah, it's my ticket from when I went to see her. It's just, it's so freaking funny and so smart. I love Felicia. I honestly could listen to this over and over and never get sick of it. And the number 1 book is Sarah Addison Allen's Garden Spells. I read this in 2017. I gave it 5 stars, obviously, and my life has not been the same ever since. Okay, how do I even, my God. I first heard about this book from Jen from Indoors Woman, which is a podcast. And thank you, Jen. I'm so glad I listened to you, and I'm so glad I read this book. So this is a magical realism book set in North Carolina. So the women of the Waverly family have a very unusual legacy. In the backyard of their Queen Anne home, there is an apple tree that gives off magical fruits. along with that tree, there are herbs and flowers planted in that garden, that backyard, that can affect whoever eats it. And so Claire Waverly lives in that town, in that the house by herself. She has a sister, but her sister is sort of a, she was very rebellious as a teen, and she ran away from home. And so Claire has been living there by herself. She is a caterer, obviously. And people in the town, they're a little scared of what she can do, of what her family's legacy is. But at the same time, they also want to hire her for their dinner parties because they want to impress their guests. They want them to, eat a lavender biscuit and feel like the most at ease that they've ever felt. Or they want to hire her for kids' birthday parties, and her cupcakes makes kids really, really good and calm and go to sleep after. So she is very successful at her catering business. But then her sister comes back into town and brings along with her some trouble, and their lives change. And there's also a new guy that's in town, so there's a little bit of romance, but just like the story of her and her sister, and the fruits that they cook with, the herbs, and that to me was my favorite part. I love cooking, and I love baking, and I love when books talk about cooking and food along with the story. And I became a little obsessed. I'm about to show you how crazy I am. So this started off because Sarah Addison Allen would talk about a certain flower, and I didn't know what that flower was. So I didn't know what that flower was, and I looked it up and then printed off a picture, and I put it in the book. And then she kept talking about other flowers that I didn't know about, and then these certain different kinds of foods. And so I printed it out, and this is what became of my book. So I have pictures all over this book of the different herbs, the flowers, and that's who I think Claire Waverly should be. And then she talks about this is the rose geranium wine. So I don't know, I just like to really feel immersed in a book, and this really helps. And it's just also you can go back and you can be like, oh yeah, this is exactly what she's talking about. So I just became completely obsessed. I also started a pretend cookbook that the Waverly girls have used for years and years and hundreds of years. And it's not finished, but I'll show you to you. So yeah, I created this little pretend, recipe cookbook type of thing. That's supposed to be an apple tree. And I just found these things online, printed them out. And again, it just really this book just inspired me to just really be more creative and just come out of my shell a little bit and go out and figure out all these things, make and bake more. And I just was obsessed. I don't know how else to put it. I was obsessed with this book. I want to read it again this summer because I like reading books kind of when they're set, the time of year they're set. So I'm really excited to read it again and open all of my little magical gifts to myself. Ooh. And also bake, because I love baking, and I love when a book takes me out of this world and it comes out into my world, and I can integrate it with my life. So that's why that book is #1. The writing is just beautiful. It's just the perfect book for me. It was let's make the perfect book for Priscilla. Let's put baking, flowers, romance, freaking gorgeous home, and set in the South. There you have it. So thanks again, Erin, for requesting this video. I had so much fun putting this together, and now I can stare at the stack of my favorite books all together, becoming friends. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to request any other videos from me, just leave a comment down below. Let me know what you'd like to see. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.